Hello, I'm talking to you from Stellenbosch. My name is Kopano Ratele. As I've been introduced, Stellenbosch is a university town in the Western Cape province of South Africa. Thank you for the invitation. I wanted to talk today about social psychology of a real society. 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago, I co-edited a book, this book. Social Psychology, Identities and Relationships, with a senior colleague of mine, just Norman Duncan, who had been doing amazing field building work before I became an academic. And I wasn't as aware as I am today how much it broke the mold. I had been teaching social psychology for a few years then, for about 7 years when the book came out. I had been working at the University of the Western Cape. And like most of us, up to today, most of us outside of the US, in South Africa in particular, but also other parts of the world, I had been using social psychology textbooks written for the US situation. And I was increasingly unhappy about channeling US psychology, which spoke to individuals in the US while I was teaching about South Africa. So I approached a publisher with an idea. It was really a co-construction because the publisher was also looking for people to publish psychology textbook. And we pitched this idea, the idea to publish this book. But the idea was this would not be a book that is common in US mainstream, white stream psychology. We wanted this social psychology that would talk to the issues in a real society, an actual society, South Africa. But let me say, a few years, over a decade before that, there had been another textbook, Social Psychology in South Africa, edited by a prominent social psychologist, back then Don Foster, and his colleague, Joha Low-Potret, who also did some amazing work in social psychology at the time. So there was some kind of precedence, but this book had also followed many of the topics and concerns of some social psychology in the US and the UK. But it was still slightly different. So instead of just prejudice, John Duckett, chapter 6, writes about prejudice and racism. And chapter 10, Joha Low-Potret contributed the chapter Language and Identity. But there were most of the work here followed some of the topics you would see in a social psychology book in the US: social influence, attitudes, intergroup relations. So when we presented and pitched an idea for social psychology, I wanted to talk about things such as apartheid, a particular form of racism in South Africa, and how social psychology might think about that. Women abuse, what's now goes under the name of gender-based violence, which is a particularly troubling issue in South Africa. Black women's identities was another chapter. Heterosexuality is another chapter. Political leadership, homelessness. So we took issues that we thought are important, and we brought in a set of contributors who would write about that from a social psychological perspective. This book has been used for the last 20 years. And we have an opportunity this year to contribute a reworked, revised, updated book. And I'm looking forward to that. And I think since 2015 in South Africa, even more space has opened to do a book, textbooks that speak much more with a bolder voice to the concerns of South Africa, issues of colonization and decolonization, issues of a new democracy, which are social psychological concerns. We're hoping we have a new publisher, a new commissioning editor, but at the same publisher, who is open to what we have 2 weeks ago, what we have presented to her. And we think now we know that, and I'm much more convinced that if you want to do a social psychology, invite students to think social psychologically, to see how person and situations are always constituting each other. You want not to focus on individuals in society only, which is the way, a dominant way of defining social psychology, but also how the situation makes the person, so the core constitution of the person in society. So we will do some chapters focusing on the person and others focusing on the situation. And we hope it'll reach the US and other parts of the world to see how you might do much more embedded social psychology. Thank you.